I'm Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. Artificial intelligence, and specifically generative AI, are the hottest topics in education today. What exactly is generative AI? Should we fear it or embrace it? Maybe both? Today, EdCast speaks with CUNY educators to discuss the uses of generative AI, its benefits, limitations, and concerns about its widespread application. If you've been wondering about ChatGPT or worried that others are using AI tools, stay tuned for this important conversation. Now on EdCast. Joining me today are Ruru Rustman and Jack Kenigsberg. Ruru Rustman is the Assistant Dean of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. After the COVID-19 pandemic shut down in-person teaching, she helped lead CUNY-wide faculty development programs on online teaching essentials. Jack Kenigsberg is acting coordinator of the Rockowitz Writing Center at Hunter College. He also teaches introductory and advanced composition and linguistics courses in the Hunter College English Department. Thank you both so much for joining us today on EdCast. AI and generative AI are the hottest topics in education today. And we want to start by helping our audience understand what is AI and what is generative AI. So Ruru, can you help us define those terms?
Sure. So AI, or artificial intelligence, is something that we've been working on for decades. And so it involves things like machine learning, pattern recognition, natural language processing. But what's new, or what's really had such a big impact recently, is what we call generative AI. So generative AI are these systems that have ingested large amounts of data. They've scanned the internet or large data sets for images, music, etc. And they are able to create or to produce products that are like recombinations in novel ways. And so that's why it's called generative AI, because they generate sort of new products.
So it would go beyond recognition and go into creation. Exactly. Now, I know you've toyed with it yourself a little, but tell us what your own experiment was like in getting generative AI to produce something for you.
Right. So a lot of people have been playing around with products like ChatGPT, which is like a chatbot. So it's an interface where you can ask the AI questions, and then it's like a plausible sentence generator, as Cory Doctorow calls it. It strings together, based on algorithms, answers that are plausible and that make a lot of sense. But it's also used in images, right? So for example, I've played around in doing images, and anything that you can think of to create, you just basically give the parameters. So for example, I was playing around and I said, give me a painting of a robot playing the violin by the Seine in the style of, I think it was Monet. Right?
Now let's take a look and see what that looks like.
Right. Yes, so it did a pretty good job.
I think it's a very good job, actually. Right. And your prompt was, again, give me an image of a robot
playing violin on the banks of the Seine in the style of Monet.
I think AI did a pretty good job. Right. So why is generative AI such a hot topic in education right now?
It's because now this very powerful tool is easily accessible to basically everyone that has an internet connection, that can that can create an account on ChatGPT with OpenAI, and they can insert their own prompts. And what's produced is, in many ways indistinguishable from what a human would produce, or it would be hard to tell. You cannot necessarily detect, oh, this is produced by a machine, this is produced by a human, a student, right? So now there's a lot of concern about what students are producing. Is it, authentic? To what extent is it their own work? To what extent do they use these new tools?
Now, Jack, you would also observe that there are other uses of this kind of AI. What else might we use it for?
Well, I think that as Ruru said, that there's a difference between, or rather, generative AI is a specific use of artificial intelligence. And so artificial intelligence widely has a lot of application. And just a few that are used in educational context. at the University of Georgia, they created a chatbot, which was linked to answers, admission answers, financial aid answers. So prospective students were able to ask, rather than calling up a financial aid advisor or asking an admissions counselor, they were able to ask the chatbot. And as they got more questions, human beings were just checking to see if it was giving them accurate answers. If they needed more answers, they built up a database. But that way the machine could understand the question and give them a prepackaged answer. It wasn't generating a new answer, it was sort of selecting the right answer. And students were doing this at like 2 in the morning when there were no admission counselors awake. And it's actually been an enormous success at Georgia State. More recently, I think John Jay College was using an AI to analyze sort of the educational histories of thousands of their current and past students, looking for signs that a student might be in distress and might be at risk of leaving the college. And the AI was able to flag hundreds of students that then the advising teams could then proactively reach out to, which reduced or increased their retention rates because it reduced the recidivism rates. So that's like, I think, that's non-generative AI.
Right.
For generative AI, as Rur said, I think the great fear is that people can generate materials for assignments that they're really meant to be doing on their own.
So we're going to get to the classroom, some of the misuses, okay? But before we get there, I wanted to take a little bit of how we use AI in the classroom. But I also wanted to point out, and you both had pointed that out to me, that there are everyone seems to have heard of ChatGPT, but there are other generative AI tools that people have been using. So we put up a list, and let's take a look at some of those. Can you see that list there? So there's text generation. What are some of the popular text generating AI platforms? We know ChatGPT, you said Jasper, what else?
Bard.
Bard.
Google's Bard. A company called Anthropic has a product called Claude, which is growing in popularity as well.
Okay, and for images, DALL-E 2, which sounds just like Wall-E. DALL-E 2.
Deliberately, yes.
Deliberately, yes. And Mid-Journey and Stable Diffusion. And there's music generation, which is unbelievable. Code generation, voice synthesis. So there are all these different kinds of platforms. So I want to get into the classroom now, because that's where I think people are curious to know. We know students can write a paper with ChatGPT, and we'll get to that, and we probably don't know if that's what they've used, but let's get to what faculty can do with it in terms of with students. So Jack, you've done a lot of work in the classrooms. You want to tell us what you did, and we can show some examples of it on screen, when you wanted to help get essay topics for your students. Let's start there.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think a lot of teachers know is that students sometimes have difficulty coming up with creative topics. They're in a class, especially if they're undergraduate students, they're learning about this for the first time, so they become very laser focused on the course and the course material, and to the point where it's very difficult sometimes for them to connect the course material to outside interests or things that they know a lot about, which would often make really interesting papers for faculty. So I have my students, I do this in my classroom, I show it to them, I have my students go to ChatGPT and prompt it to suggest essay topics that combine linguistics, because I teach linguistics classes, and then the example I give is my love of National Football League, because I am a football fan. But then I tell them, of course, they should, substitute their hobby, and because I think, as Ruru said, a lot of these generative AIs work with pattern recognition. They're actually incredibly good at connecting topic A and topic B in a way that's coherent.
Let's see what they came up with. This is what they came up with. Let's take a look.
I see. This is my experiment. I tried this before. I did not do this live in the classroom. I did this before so that I would know. And then I got this. It gave me this list. Something with sociolinguistics, something with a lexical study, pragmatics, so many different fields of linguistics, And I looked at this list, which it generated in about 10 seconds.
Wow.
Right? Because it goes very, very quickly. And I'm looking at this list going and thinking to myself, I would love to read every single one of these papers. And then I thought, I would like to write about half of them. Because they fall within like my fields of interest.
They're that interesting.
And I show this to I do this to my students, and my students then substitute theirs. And last semester, I had a student who wrote about linguistics and baking blogs, linguistics and gardening, linguistics and jazz. Some really fascinating topics, and they were excited to write the papers.
Well, I have to say, I was really taken by the topics too. A sociolinguistic analysis of NFL football commentators, language and identity, the syntax of NFL play calling, NFL jargon, and the emergence of a specialized language. They were really interesting. Rue, is there anything that you've done in the classroom as well, or with faculty, to use this these generative tools?
Not exactly in this case, but I will tell a funny story that I was actually putting together a talk for the faculty on AI, and I asked it for talk titles that had AI that had puns, and so it generated like 10 of them. Yes.
And were they good?
They were pretty good. Some of them were really a little bit of a stretch, but
not bad.
yeah. So we came up with teaching with intelligence.
Teaching
AI
with
in the
intelligence.
classroom.
That's
That was-
very, they say puns show a certain amount of cleverness. I mean, teaching
well,
with intelligence, that's a very good pun. Anything else you remember? That's a good one. I like that one. All right, let's go back then to Jack's classroom again. I know you've done, quickly, I know you've done some work with phonology and helping AI, asking AI to help you, I would say, get some of your lessons together or help your students get lessons together. Let's take a look at that for a minute or two.
Sure. So if you think about just like the prompt that you gave the image generator, you actually gave quite a bit of detail. And the way that a lot of these generators work is the less detail you give them, the more generic the response is, the more specific your prompt to them, the more customized the output would be. It is possible to ask a lot of generative text AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard, to become your personal coach on anything. But it requires an extensive prompt. So some of these prompts, which I did not write, I got from Reddit. And there are a lot of communities online where people are creating prompts that might be over 100 words long, 2-3 paragraphs of giving an AI very detailed information about what you want it to do for you. And so one of the things that you could do, a prompt that I got from Reddit that I've then tested is asking it to, and it requires a lot of step-by-step direction, but to say that I want you to teach me phonology, I want you to break down every lesson into little component parts, to not jump ahead, to give me interactive exercises. If I get them wrong, to give me correction and then redo it until I get it right, then move on to the next lesson. So in a few dozen or maybe a few hundred words, I can create a personal tutor that will give me 20, 30 lessons on something.
Can we just take a look on screen and just see what that looked like when you did that? So here is lesson 1, Introduction to Phonology. You see that it's broken down. Lesson 1, what is phonology? And then there are exercises. It's pretty good. I mean, it's like a textbook, I would say.
And speaking of textbooks, right, many departments will pay these textbook publishers hundreds of dollars per student for access to these interactive homework banks. And this requires a prompt I adapted very lightly from Reddit. It's free, and it's a personalized homework bank.
Now, what was the other thing you did with the Pareto principle tutoring? And we'll do that quickly.
So the Pareto principle is an idea that in almost any given field of inquiry, if you know the right 20%, you will then be able to understand about 80%.
Okay.
Right? So not all information is not equal. So a simple prompt you can give to one of these chat generators is tell me the 20% that I need to understand 80% of the thing that I want to know. And then it will blast out
And did
the
this
basics.
do the job? When we're looking at this over here, the language structure, phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax.
Yes, I mean, if I just say I want to learn about linguistics, it actually gave me immediately basically the outline to a textbook on linguistics. But it got all like the right topics. But these are chatbots, right? So they're iterative. You can then grab one of these things and say, well, tell me about that 20% about morphology I need. And then it starts breaking it down. And yes, it becomes an actual guide and it can be really good for students to be like, I have this huge textbook, I have to read 300 pages this week. That's very overwhelming, and it's very overwhelming to think I need to understand all of these pages, every word on every one of these pages. But no, this can guide you. No, here are the 20% that you really need to know in order to understand the majority of what you're reading. And it can really be it can be used as a guide to help students process that information.
Looks like quite a good guide. So let's get back to the other big part of the conversation. That's people's concerns about using generative AI in education. What are some of the concerns that people have regarding the use of generative AI?
Right. So one of them is actually connected to what Jack was just saying, right? So because this is so powerful, you can use it to do things like summarize for you, right? So this has its good points and its bad points. So you can feed the ChatGPT, for example, you can upload PDFs or documents, whatever, and you say, summarize this for me, right? Which is something that we teach our students to do: read, understand, summarize, And so this is kind of like a shortcut to that. And so our students learning the skills that they need to learn, right? So that's one question. And then the other big question, or another big question, of course, is what we call cheating, or what a lot of people talk about, academic integrity, right? So to what extent are students using these tools to produce homework, to produce essays, to produce, all kinds of written texts?
Can we tell, I mean, in previous iterations of plagiarism, students could buy a paper off the internet.
Yeah.
And if I use Turnitin, which is one of the softwares that we all had at CUNY, it'll tip me off, it'll help me. Can we detect a paper that is done with ChatGPT, let's say?
It's problematic because there are AI detectors, right?
Does it work?
Not so well, right? So do they work to some extent? Maybe, right? So the algorithms that analyze the text, we don't always know what they do, so a little bit of a black box, so it's hard to tell. And if you feed the same amount of, the same chunk of text into different detectors, you will get different answers, so not great, right? And it's also been shown that second language writers or writers with a less developed educational background with maybe simpler writing are often like misdetected as AI because of that type of writing. So there are
When you
there
say
are issues.
misdetected, meaning they're detected when they're not using...
Correct. Falsely identified.
accused.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And what else do we need to worry about in terms of AI? I know there's some bias concerns. What are some of the other issues that we worry about?
I mean, I think there's quite a bit, right? So I think it goes back. One of the great concerns I think goes back to Ruru, what you said at the very, very beginning. These generators aren't really creating anything that's truly novel. They're recombining things in ways that seem novel. And maybe we've never seen this combination, but everything they're doing is a recombination of what's part of their training set. So whatever's in their training set is what they will then reproduce in various ways, shapes, or forms. If their training set includes material that is grossly racist, sexist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, you name it, it will be reproduced, or it can be reproduced. A lot of the companies try to put guardrails around the most egregious responses, but it's not that difficult to get around them, and also it's impossible for them to predict exactly what will come out. So it's really, really limited in that regard. And all of them. So here's a fairly infamous story. A student, I believe, at one of the Ivies, I believe at Harvard, an Asian student, and this is important, took a photo of herself. She had a selfie, and rather than going to pay for a professional headshot, she fed it into an image generator and asked it to make her look more professional. But if you think about probably most pictures of corporate women, they probably don't look very Asian. And so it lightened her skin to change the shape of her eyes and made her white.
Yes.
Wow.
And but she asked to look more professional. And this isn't
Your point is taken.
right. But this isn't like nefarious on the part of the AI that it has an agenda. It has data. It like if it has like pictures of women that are tagged as being, in a corporate environment. Most of them statistically look a certain way. That's what it interprets as professional. And it's but the result is terribly racist.
Right.
And that happens with text, that can happen with anything. It will repackage its data accordingly.
Right.
So something really to look out for. Then let me ask you, if we are going to be using generative AI, it seems like we are going to, what are some of the best practices that you would recommend for faculty and for classrooms if we're going to be using generative AI?
Right.
What should we be doing?
I think actually it's very important to be giving this sort of background to both faculty and to students, right? To understand the biases in the data so we don't get fooled by them. To understand also what generative AI is and how it works, and the fact that it's not like actually creating anything new. It's just stringing things together, right? And I think that's something that is very misinterpreted, right? Because people are saying things like, "Oh, the AI is hallucinating," or it's like in love or whatever, and this is wrong.
Well,
right?
let's talk about hallucination. I've heard that term used when AI makes things up.
Right.
And it does. I mean, ChatGPT will make up references. I mean, I've seen that. You ask it to do a scholarly paper.
Right.
And it happened to a colleague of mine who was working with a TA, and the TA gave her a list of references that were all fictionalized, and the TA didn't know because she asked ChatGPT. So that's what I thought was what hallucination meant. Is that a
Yes.
misuse of the term?
No, that's correct. But that's like putting some agency on the AI. But
Okay,
that's
all
that's
right.
just how the program works,
Okay.
right? It says,
Like
okay,
that, giving the agency to the AI. All right.
there is no agency. There is no. It doesn't know whether something is correct
It
or not
doesn't do it
correct.
on purpose. It just
Not at all. It's just saying, oh, these are the parameters you gave me,
So
right?
why
It's
does
like,
it
oh, I
make
could
it up,
string
though?
this.
I mean, it makes it up. It doesn't know that it's fictionalizing references?
No, because it's statistically, right? Statistically, it says, oh, this author statistically has written a lot of text on this, and these are titles, and so it can just recombine these titles.
Some of the authors didn't exist, though, in this particular case. That was a real hallucination.
Also
I mean,
as well.
my friend tried to look them up.
Right.
But all right, but that point is, okay, so
Yes.
you really have to know where your information is coming from when you're dealing with generative AI. And I suppose, again, considering the bias, bias issues, and so checking for accuracy, and I guess we always want our students to tell us, and we want to tell them when we are using AI content. Right, so, okay, so where are we now? If we can figure out where are we and where are we going? Anybody
Yeah.
where you want to start? Where are we now and where are we going?
I think we are at a very, very early stage, right? And everyone is very panicking about this, which is totally understandable because this has really landed on us like a plane. So,
It has,
but we try to say, okay, we're all still learning, faculty and students, right? So it's important at the point where we are now. It's important to engage in that conversation with the students and not to say, okay, you can't use it at all, right? So we need to engage and have this conversation and say, okay, are we literate about what the AI does? How can we use it? Let's learn together how to use it because we don't know yet. We simply don't know, right? We've seen these moral panics, or don't want to call them moral panics. We've had these panics before, techno panics, whenever we have new tools, right? It's like, oh, it's upset everything. The internet came, it was just like, oh, what's going on in the classroom? What are we teaching kids? They can just look everything up.
They can.
They can, but then we like come back and say,
Right.
oh, we don't really want to teach kids content that they can look up. We want to teach them how to think about it, right? Right. So it took a while to start doing that, and I think we're still not even with the internet far in that. So I think we're a very early stage.
And what do you add to that?
We're only really a generation into the internet. I mean, when I was only partway through my undergraduate career when Google came out. I remember Google when there was before Google, and then there was Google one day, and it was built into Yahoo, and then it was. But I think the point that you just made is that we're at a very early stage is maybe the most important point to make to everyone who's watching this. ChatGPT is about to have its first birthday.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it came in at the end
Happy
of November.
birthday, ChatGPT.
Right,
Okay.
it came around Thanksgiving of last year.
Okay.
Around it was November of last year. So it's literally, it's not even quite 1 year old. We're only in our second full semester. I mean, you asked Linda about like the almost like the best practices. There aren't best practices. There can't be best practices yet, because best practices require there to be practices, right? Multiple practices that get iterated, that people can see, mimic, evaluate, and then figure out which ones are best, and that takes time. So I think the point you made is like really important. I think we should not shy away from the fact that we're all collectively learning, and we all should, I think, engage in this.
So, final word to our viewers is to come back next year when we tell you how far we've come along and what the new concerns and trends are. We are completely out of time, so I want to thank you both so much for joining me today, Ruru Rustman and Jack Hennigsberg. It's been a pleasure having you both here. This has been so informative and has told us what we know and what we don't know. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next time.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to CUNYEdcast@gmail.com.